But with that, you are pledging an allegiance. And really, you're not pledging your allegiance to this flag. Oh, great and mighty flag. The flag is not going to do anything for you. You're pledging your allegiance to a country. And I, myself, believe it or not, believe we should pledge our allegiance to our country. But my allegiance to this country that we live in is not undivided. For example, if this country were to do something that was to endanger my family, my allegiance would be to my family and not to this country. Because my family is more important to me than this country. If this country required me to do something that was contrary to my faith in God, my belief in Jesus, my allegiance to this country would suffer, because my relationship with Jesus and my commitment to God will override my allegiance to this country. And so we have things in our life that we pledge, whether we do it vocally or not, that we pledge allegiance to. If you are married, chances are you pledged an allegiance to your spouse by saying your vows and then repeating after the officiant and saying, "I do." If you have a job, in some respect, you pledged allegiance to your job, whether it's by signing a contract or a verbal agreement. So when I came up here about 4.5 years ago and started leading this church, there was a kind of a verbal, but mostly non-verbal agreement between myself, the board, and everybody that was part of this church at that time. But I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody in this church, my allegiance to this church is limited if it is going to hurt my family and hurt, believe it or not, my relationship with God. And you say, how could a church hurt your relationship with God? I have a pastor friend. Well, he's not really a friend. I mean, I kind of worked with him. He was a pastor, and I was in college. And he took over a church, and he wanted to make it successful. He had been at his previous church, I want to say probably about 15 years, 20 years, something like that. Maybe it was 11 years. It was more than 10 anyway. And he grew that church from a small group of people to almost a mega church. And he was going to do the same thing when he came to this new church. And what ended up happening is in his efforts to reproduce something that happened, he allowed the church to lead him to a place where his wife left him and he abandoned his faith in God. So it can happen. In almost every aspect of our lives, we have allegiances, and a lot of those allegiances are divided. But there is one aspect in our life where we cannot afford to have a divided allegiance. This part of our life, we have to have undivided allegiance. You want to know what that is? Good, I'm glad you said yes, because I'm going to read it to you. To find out what that is, we have to go to Exodus chapter 20. As most of you know, we started a new series last week called The 10 Words. And I want to kind of go over a couple of things to help give us a baseline if you weren't here, or maybe to refresh your memory so we can build off of that. First thing to understand is that while we call them the 10 Commandments, they are not called the 10 Commandments within the Old Testament or the New Testament. They are literally called the 10 words. In the Hebrew, they're referred to as the 10 words in the Old Testament, and in the Greek in the New Testament, they are referred to the Decalogue or Decalogos, 10 words. So it's important for us to understand that. All right, while they are commandments in the effect that if we break one, we break the law that God has established. But if we look at them as commandments, then we're looking at them as God is a great punisher waiting for us to break a commandment. These were given to the Israelite people not as a burden, but as a way to show them how to live as free people. Remember, they were in Egypt, and God miraculously drew them out of Egypt, and he says, you lived as slavery for 400 years. Now I'm going to teach you how to live as free people. And that's what they were supposed to do. We often look at them as a stop sign. And you run a stop sign, what's going to happen? The cop's going to find you, and he's going to give you a ticket. And that's how we view this. We view them as stop signs where God's waiting up there for us to cross that line so he can slap us in the hand and reprimand us. Instead, it's more like lines on the side of the road. And God has this road. And actually, it's the road that leads us to his presence, leads us to his eternity with him. And he wants us to stay on that road. So he gives us these lines on the sides of the road to direct us to where we can spend eternity with him. And the further off of, once we go over the line, it becomes dangerous, whether we go over to the curve or to the edge of the road or to the oncoming traffic. It's dangerous. He knows that. So he puts these there to keep us out of danger. And we know that Jesus summed up the law with these words: love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So this is the basis for where we are going for the next 10 weeks, including tonight. We're going to be talking about the 10 statements, the 10 words, and what are they relevant for us today? Well, absolutely. So how? Today's is going to be one of the more difficult ones based on what this commandment is because, well, let's just read it. Exodus chapter 20, we're going to read 3 verses, 1 through 3. Then God spoke all these words: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. There's an issue that we run into sometimes when we're reading the Bible, and that is we misunderstand some of the things because it was originally written in a certain language and written in a culture that is so different from us today. And so when we read this first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me, if you're like me, the first thing I no, God, you're the greatest God there is. But in saying that, you are saying that there are other gods. That word before is not best understood as in order. You have this before that, but as in my presence. Think of it as, you shall have no other God in my presence. And this makes a little bit more sense when you understand where's God's presence. For a period of time, it was in the temple. But was it limited to the temple? Part of God's nature is that he is everywhere at all times. You can't take that away from him. That's who he is. And so no matter where you place a God, it would be in his presence. So I think a better understanding is have no other God besides me. In other words, I'm the only God. I'm the living God. There is no other gods. So what are you doing? It's interesting when you look at what God does as he is bringing out the Israelites from Egypt. Remember, they were in slavery for 400 years. They learned very well how to be slaves. They knew how to be slaves. He brings them out, and through a series of 10 miracles, he brings them out, and then he parts the sea, and they walk through on dry ground. And then you get to this mountain where he gives them these 10 words. And his very first statement when he's speaking to them is identifying himself, what he has done, and what he expects. I am the Lord your God, that's who he is, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, that what he has done, and then you shall have no other gods before me. What he expects. When he brought the Israelites out of Egypt, he performed 10 miracles. And we don't read this directly in the scripture, but did you know that each one of those miracles correlates with a God that the Israelites, a false God, that the Israelites served? Now, there are some of them that if we look at, you can say, well, this one matches here, and this one. The Bible doesn't say that he denounced this God by doing this miracle or this God. But one thing we do know is that the last two miracles that took place, the last two were in direct opposition to the two greatest gods the Israelites had. I mean, Egyptian, not Israelite. Thank you. The two greatest gods the Egyptians had. That's what I need her in the front row for. The second to last plague was darkness. And that was in reference to the god Ra, which was their greatest god, save one. You knew who actually was considered their greatest god? Pharaoh. And you know what he did to Pharaoh? He killed every one of the firstborn. What God was doing when he was bringing the Israelites out of Egypt is he was teaching the Egyptians that he is more powerful than their gods. And he was teaching the Israelites that, hey, I am who I said I was. I am the one and only, the living God. If you start off in Genesis, you can really understand this. Because everything that we see, all of these false gods that we see the Egyptians worshiping, God had created every one of them in the book of Genesis. Not the gods, but the gods what they represent. Okay? Water turning to blood. God created water. Frogs coming from the Nile. That'd just be nasty. You read the story and you're sitting down having dinner and there's a frog on your shoulder and one in your plate, one in your lap. Lice coming from the earth. Swarms of flies. God created. Cattle and livestock dying. God created cattle and livestock. Ashes turned to boils and sores. Yeah, God created that too. Hail in the form of fire. Yep. Locusts. Yep. Darkness. Firstborn. All of these things were things that God created. And there's been discussion on what these gods were. And you can only come up with two things. Either they were angels, which we understand were created beings by God, or they were an imagination of the people who lived. They're not really gods, but we're gonna say they are gods because it gives us something to worship. Something to worship is built, needing something to worship is built within us. And that is why there have been gods as long as there have been human beings. Now you say, what about atheists? Atheists don't believe in God. No, but you know who they worship? Themselves. Sometimes they worship other people, but they still worship something. Everybody does. And what God is saying in this first commandment is that, hey, listen, I am the one and the only one that you should be worshiping. You should not have any other gods, which we understand as that they're not really gods. But you should not have anything else that you worship. Now, this commandment can be a little hard for us to understand because how many of you regularly go out and worship a false god? Anybody want to admit that? No, we don't. That would be stupid. We don't worship false gods. Or do we? Or do we? Jesus actually talked about this same thing, except for he didn't use gods when he was talking about it because, well, there's a reason why he didn't use gods. Let's go ahead and go to that. You won't have it on the screen because I didn't give it to him, but Matthew chapter 6, verse 24 says, "No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money." Well, how does that relate? Because he's not talking about false gods, he's talking about money. To really understand the idea that he is getting at here is you have to realize, first of all, that when Jesus is talking and saying to this, he's talking to a group of people who already believe there is only one God. So if he would have come out and said, hey, listen, you can't serve God and a false God, because they would have said, you're absolutely right. It would not have meant anything to them. So he used a tactic, and he's really good at this, that they could understand. He says, you can't serve God, who is to be your master, and you can't serve money. And he uses master, but it's really easy to throw master or to interchange master and a false god. And the issue that Jesus is bringing up is the same issue that God addresses when he gives the first statement or the first word to the Israelites. And that is, there's only one. You're either going to serve him or you're not going to serve him. There's no other choice. There's no other option. There's no option C. You serve God, and you do it wholeheartedly with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, that Jesus said, or you don't. When we choose to serve God, but don't serve him alone, we become polytheistic. You know what polytheistic means? It means more than one. Polytheistic means more than one. As opposed to pantheism, which means God is in everything. Just a little bit of education for you in case you didn't know that. Here's how a good way of remembering. I think I've shared this before, but one good way of remembering pantheism and polytheistic is very simple. Pantheism means God can be in anything, even a frying pan. Pantheism. Okay? Now you all will never forget what call it frying pantheism if you want. And if God could be in a frying pan, he could be in anything. The Israelites were monotheistic. They believed in one. And so when Jesus was talking to them, he had to show them that they needed to serve God, not just as opposed to false gods, but as opposed to anything else that would be in their life. And in this particular instance, he uses money because he was just talking about where they were putting their future. He says, store up treasures in heaven. Don't store up treasures in earth. And then he says this, you can't serve two masters. You can't serve two gods. Don't we sometimes try and serve two gods? There's nobody that I have ever talked to who will not admit, especially mature Christians, who will not admit that they have struggled with this. At least at some point in their past. And because it's a continual fight on making sure that we are serving God. So how do you know that you are only serving the one true God and you're not dual worshiping? Well, that's hard to decipher. It is very hard to decipher because there's a lot of factors that play into this. I like to golf. Everybody knows it. In fact, today after service, me and Ron are going to head out to the golf course. I hope his wife already knows because I just informed her if she didn't. This is our normal Saturday afternoon thing, so it wouldn't be surprising to her. We're going to go to the golf course because I love playing golf. We're going to try to get done before the storms get in. Golf is not my master, but I love to do it. I spend a lot of time doing it, as much time as I can. At what point does golf become my master as opposed to God being my master? At what point do I start worshiping the false god of golf as opposed to the true God who created the heavens and the earth? It becomes when our love for whatever it is, and it could be golf, it could be anything, our love for that thing starts making our decisions and not our love for God. I could talk a lot about different ways that, or things that could be a God to us, and I don't have really that much time. So I want to look at just 3 or 4 things that I think a lot of us could struggle with, and we could start worshiping if we're not careful. I've already touched on the first one, and this is a difficult one. We have to ask ourselves this question: do we serve Jesus alone, or do we serve Jesus and the God of money? And I bring this one up particularly because it is so oppressive in our society today. The need to be rich. The desire to have more than enough. We have to be very careful about how we treat money. And how do we treat money? You know, the Bible, when you read the New Testament, it is difficult to really grasp the expectation that that we have toward God in regards to our money. And I don't have time to go into all of the nuances of how we spend our money, but I will tell you this. Paul, more than one place, talks about being generous with your money. And so that is the basis that we're going to start with. We need to be generous with our money. If God says you need to do this with your money, guess what? If God says you need to give this amount of money to the hearse, which he did that to me while I was sitting there worshiping, and I was like going, okay, God, well, how about this much? Did you know God doesn't really change his mind? No matter how much you have. If God tells me this is how much I want you to give, and you don't give that much, guess what? That's called disobedience. But generosity isn't generosity if you're not doing what's expected of you in the first place. And I use this illustration all the time. If you have, when I was growing up, part of our expectation as my parents had on us was that we were going to go clean the kitchen. I hated cleaning the kitchen. I would go out and scoop dog poop out of the yard as opposed to clean the kitchen. But it was part of my job, so I would go in there. And my parents would go, I want you to go in and I want you to wash the dishes. So I'd go in there and I'd wash the dishes, set them on the counter after you rinse them, and put them on the counter and let them, because I washed the dishes. I did exactly what she told me to do. Do you think she was happy about that? No. Nobody would be happy. Nobody's excited when you do just what you're supposed to do. But if I was to go in there and wash the dishes like she told me, and then put them away, and then put all of everything else that was on the counters, wipe the counters down, then I swept the floor in the kitchen. You know what? I already swept. I might as well mop the floor too. And then my mom comes into the room, and she says, wow, that was generous. You did more than I expected you to do. Being generous is going above and beyond the expectation. If you just do the expectation, don't consider yourself generous. Where does that expectation start? Well, the New Testament doesn't give us any, this is where your expectation lies. But Jesus does reference the tithe and the expectation that the tithe should be given. So 10%, that's the starting point. If you just give 10% of your income back to God, don't think you're being generous, because that is the expectation. Now, anything above and beyond that there is being generous. And we need to understand this, because sometimes we say, man, I did a good job because I did what I was told to do. No, you did what you were told to do. No participation trophies. I don't believe in. Hey, listen, if they participated and you want to give them a ribbon for participating, go for it. But don't give them the same ribbon you give the winners. I'm not going to get there. That's also, and I need to throw this in there too, is that we should give cheerfully. Cheerfully. It's not just being generous, but being cheerful. And if you haven't mastered that, work on it. Work on it. Sometimes I'm not a very cheerful giver. Nobody would know because I'm very even-tempered, and so nobody can read my face very well. But when I'm able to give, the hearse are raising money, I'm able to give to help do that. You know, that makes God happy. That makes them happy because they know that they're going to be able to be on their way to raising their budget. It makes me happy because God's work is getting accomplished. Do we serve Jesus alone or do we also serve the God of money? Another question we need to ask is, do we serve Jesus alone, or do we serve the God of pleasure? I've had conversations with people a lot of times about the idea of pleasure, and I believe that God gives us a lot of freedom to do things that we enjoy. For instance, golf. You didn't know I was going to talk about golf, did you? I enjoy golf, and God doesn't have a problem with me going and playing golf. In fact, He enjoys it when I go and enjoy myself playing golf. God enjoys my wife sitting down on the couch reading a good book because she enjoys it, so He enjoys her enjoying it. Parents know what this is like. When you see your kid doing something they love to do and they have a big smile on your face, what does that do? Puts a big smile on your face because you see them enjoying themselves. That's how God is. So when does pleasure become an opponent of God? It's when we care more about pleasure and desiring to have pleasure than we do about the things of God. Did you know that the people between the ages of 20 and 35, and when I read this, I was just taken back, but adults between the ages of 20 and 35 spend more time looking at a screen, TV, computer, phone, than they do interacting with other adults. Wow. And with mobile phones now and smartphones, and you can take a screen with you everywhere you go. You can sit and you can look at the screen while you're sitting on the couch. When we first got smartphones, and this I had to get used to this. I had to admit it. And we do this sometimes too. We'll be sitting on the couch watching TV, and I'm watching TV, and my wife is doing this. Aren't you watching TV? Yes, I am. It's good too. We have to be careful, though. We have to be careful that this doesn't become our life. I watched a video a while ago, and maybe some of you have seen it, that there's an addiction that can take place. And the guy that was presenting this information was talking specifically about social media. But there's this feeling you get when you're on social media and you posted something. There's this feeling you get when you see somebody liked it or somebody commented a positive thing about it. That feeling you get corresponds with the feeling that some people get when they do illegal drugs. Do we serve Jesus alone, or do we find a way to serve the God of pleasure? I don't really have time to go into the whole sex thing, but we know sex is everywhere. And I do want to say this, that sex within the bounds of marriage is the acceptable way for God, for you to live out your godliness. But just because your sex is within the bounds of marriage does not make it okay. Did you get that? And here's what I mean by that. Again, I've talked with a lot of people about it. For me, this whole talking about people's sex issues, I'm not good at that. Listen, if you have your sex problems, let me give you a good phone number to call. But if you have to force yourself on your spouse, you think God's pleased with that? If you have to convince yourself, your spouse, that something is okay, but they feel uncomfortable with it, do you think God is pleased with that? we had Greg Colgrove and his wife came and did a marriage seminar, and we'll have him back again at some point in time. But she's a sex therapist, and one of the things that she did, if you have no basis as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, go with the least person's convictions. So whoever feels the least comfortable about something, you go with their convictions. It's a way of loving the other person more than you love yourself. The God of pleasure, do we serve that greater than we serve Jesus? How about, do we serve Jesus alone, or do we serve the God of success and influence? Are you willing to uphold godly standards if it costs you your job, if it costs you position, if it costs you a raise, if it costs you friends, if it costs you followers on social media? As a youth pastor, there are several times where I had parents come talk to me about their child's rights within school, and could they take their Bible? Could they talk to people about Jesus and all this other stuff? Now students have different set of rules than employees of the school. But if we don't, in fact, there's somebody who's dealing with this right now. And if we don't set a precedent, if we are not willing to say, this is what's right, my child has this right, and we just dismiss it, what's going to happen is they're going to think they're right, and they're going to do it again. And so we need to, lovingly, it has to be lovingly, we need to make sure that we know what our rights are, or your child's rights are going into the school, and in a loving way, make sure the school understands that they cannot infringe on your rights. Your child has every right to take their Bible to school. Your child has every right to talk to any student about their relationship with Jesus. And to not let them do that, they're infringing on the Constitution and our religious rights. So, the question that comes down to, as we close, is simply this: are we serving God alone? Is Jesus our only master? And if you're like me, you know I try to be as real as I can. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you make mistakes. And sometimes you just really screw up. I can do that really good. Sometimes you say things that God is like going, what in the world are you doing? I mean, God has actually said that to me. Not in an audible voice, but what are you doing? And then usually it's after the fact. Because if I had heard him before the fact, I probably wouldn't have said it. Make a decision. God says, now, was that really the best decision to make? There were times where I spent my tithe money on a new car. Well, not a new car, an old piece of junk, beat-up car, because I didn't make enough money for my tithe money to be that much. You know what sets me apart from a lot of other people? And that is when I realize that I've done something. And the Israelites were able to do this, but not all the time. When I realized I'd done something, I didn't say, oh, well, you know what? I'm only human. Can't do any better. Instead of that, I cried out to God. I said, God, I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. I know I shouldn't have. Forgive me. Help me do better. Help me be a different person. So as I close in prayer, I want you to contemplate that. I want you to talk to God. Maybe He's already been speaking to you about something in your life, a decision that you've made, a change that you need to make. As I close in prayer, wrestle with this question. Let Him speak to you, and leave this room with a new vision and a new desire to serve Jesus alone. Heavenly Father, we love you, and we thank you that you are the one true God, the living God. There is no other. The God that created the world in the beginning, and the God that is still participating in the lives of His people. We thank you for that. We thank you for the 10 words that you've given to us to guide us, to instruct us, to keep us on the road. And now, Lord, sometimes we veer off. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we do bad decisions. I just pray that you would help us. You would help me to get back on the road, to continue to hear your word, to seek your direction, so that I can stay on that road. Help me serve you, but serve you alone as God. We love you. We thank you. And we give you all the praise. And everyone say, amen. Thank you, guys. I love you. Real quick, because of baccalaureate this Wednesday, we will not be having service here at this church. If you want to join us over at the high school for baccalaureate, you're more than welcome to. But just wanted to make you aware of that. Be blessed, and I will see you next Sunday.